Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, today is a continuation of the previous video where I looked at installing one of Hornby's new TXS Bluetooth decoders into this Helgen DP2. So today's video is, of course, now looking at installing the TXS chip into the Hornby 9F. So if you watched the previous video, and there's a link in the top corner for that, the original plan, of course, was to try and cover both locomotives in one video, but as I mentioned in that previous video, I got into some rather sticky complications with the Hornby 9F, and in the end I decided it was best to separate that out into a separate video, which is what this video is today. So this is the Hornby 9F here. Now, this is not the most recent version of their 9F. Just recently they of course did a retooling for their 9F, and I do have one of those. It's a beautiful locomotive, but this is the previous version, so quite old tooling, but it is the slightly updated mechanism. So it's not the old ring-filled motor in the tender. It is actually locomotive driven, and of course the tender has the DCC socket and also some allowance for a speaker. So one of the other aspects that I did have a crack at when I was working at installing this locomotive was actually trying out the new Android version of the app. So I do have a spare Android phone which I do use for my design work, so I thought I'd have a go with the Android app and see if there was any difference. Now that added, of course, some further complications to the install, hence why this is a separate video. So I think without further ado, let's just get into what I got up to and some of the curly situations I encountered. Right, so the next loco I thought I'd try, of course, is a steam locomotive. Now, I will say I'm not actually overly a fan of steam sound in models. That just kind of doesn't sound right. The diesels seem to sound better than how a steam locomotive sounds, but I thought we'd give it a go anyway. So of course we've got a Hornby 9F here. It's the Evening Star. This is one of the later models they made where they switched to locomotive drive, and of course the tender is fully accessible and available for speakers and also stay alives and things like that. So this has actually got a stay alive in it at the moment. I bought this second hand somewhere, and I didn't actually realize that it actually had all of this fitted in it. So of course that will come out, but there's plenty of room in there for the large speaker baffle, and also I could fit a stay alive in there too if I wanted to, but we'll see how it goes. So we've got our normal sort of wire connections between the tender and the locomotive. So the product here, of course, is the 8-pin decoder. So this is sort of going back to the issue I had with the first locomotive I did in the previous video, and where I'd actually plugged the 8-pin decoder in the wrong way around, and I think that may have been what caused the DCC address to get a little bit scrambled. So it's clearly marked here actually on this particular one here that pin 4 is actually marked. So theoretically I shouldn't really get this around the wrong way this time. So we'll get this installed, and then we'll go through the same process and see how it works. Right, so I've now installed the 8-pin decoder in here, and also the speaker and largest baffle they have available in the tender just temporarily. It should all fit in there quite nicely once I put the cover back over the tender. Now, just to change it up a little bit, what I'm actually going to use is the Android version, which of course has just been launched recently. So I have an Android phone. I actually just use it simply for testing web development and so forth for my graphic design job. So this is a Galaxy A12, so it's not exactly the flashiest of phones. So I've installed the HM7000 app and it seemed to install okay, and as far as I can see, it's not on Hornby's list of incompatible Android devices. So we'll switch on once again the track power and let's just see if we can link up to this device. Right, okay, so we don't seem to be getting any action here. Now, I have confirmed that my Bluetooth has been activated on the phone, so theoretically it should be able to find the device. Well, we're not getting very far so far with Android. I'm just going to grab my iPhone and actually just see whether it picks up the device. So I'm just going to move this out of the way, bring in the iPhone and just see what happens. Right, okay, so it's found it straight away, so that's interesting. What is happening with the Android? So if I go to, let's just close that for a second. Maybe I might need to do an update or do this and then come back. So after about a gazillion updates, because I don't use this phone very often, so the Android software was very out of date and it went through quite a few updates. I also went into the app setting for the HM7000 and just double checked that the permissions for Bluetooth were activated, and they actually weren't. So although I clicked to allow permissions, for some reason it hadn't actually activated. So it's under permissions and it's nearby devices, and it's basically to allow permissions for nearby devices. So I'm kind of hoping that that is going to solve the problem. So if we go back into our app and we'll now go back and see what happens if we link a device, and still we have nothing. Right, okay, I've done a lot of mucking around with this and Bluetooth is on, the app has access to Bluetooth, and I'm just getting nothing. So I don't know what the story is with the Android. Maybe this device is not compatible, which is the Samsung A12. So let's just get that phone out of the way and bring our trusty old iPhone back in. And yeah, I mean, it comes up straight away. So we'll set it up with the iPhone. I'm going to give up on Android, hence why I use Apple. Right, okay, so this one didn't turn out to be nearly as plain sailing as the DP2. So first of all, the speaker that came in this one was knackered. It just made a very high-pitched hissing noise, so I was hoping it was a speaker and not the actual decoder, or actually the sound profile itself. So I pinched the speaker out of the DP2 because we know that that was working quite well, and it is actually working. So I'll switch the sound on in a second. So I was able to eliminate that as a dud speaker. So we'll run through some of the sounds, and you know, it's actually not too bad, I guess, for the 9F. Now I've dialed down the volume because the default volume is just far too high, so these have been reduced down quite considerably. So as you can tell, it actually doesn't sound too bad at all, and it's just unfortunate the speaker that came with the 8-pin decoder pack turned out to be a dud. Now I am considering putting in this Megabase speaker, and it has the same ohm rating, so I might just give this a go and see how it sounds. Now if I accidentally blow up the chip, then it's my own fault. So we'll give it a go and maybe just see if this speaker will work in there. Actually, before I do that, let's see if it actually fits. Yeah, so it fits in the body, so we'll try this and see how it goes. So I've already gone ahead, chopped the wires off the Hornby supplied speaker and soldered them to this, hence we get the nice little wee JST plug to plug into the decoder chip. Right, okay, we've got this Megabase speaker just plonked in there at the moment, and let's just see if it works, and if it blows up. I guess it blows up. Well, it does work, so I might use the speaker, but obviously I'm going to have to get a baffle for the speaker so that it improves its sound a bit. Right, so I've gone a wee step further and actually created my own baffle for the speaker, because it was over the weekend, I wasn't able to get hold of one. So this is just made out of plastic card, and it's all sort of welded together with the Humbrol cement, and it seems to work okay. So I'll just switch this on now. So the baffle has certainly made a difference to the sound quality. It sounds a little bit more throaty and bassy, but as I said before, steam sound just doesn't quite sound right to me compared to diesel sound profiles. So going back to trying to set this up with the Android phone, I went back and had a check with the incompatibility lists, and there's two lists that they've now put out from the Hornby website. One is actually dated last month and the other one was back in March, and interestingly the March update lists the A12 as an in-progress development, so I'm going on the assumption that they still haven't actually sorted it out yet, and the A12 is still yet to be formally made compatible with the DCC app and the Bluetooth chips. So I'll just recap on some of the issues that I had with this particular installation into the 9F. Firstly, of course, there was the issue with the supplied speaker. Now, when I say it was a high-pitched hissing sound, it was a high-pitched sort of hiss in the background and a very muffled or faint sound that was actually producing the sounds from the profile. It was very, very muted, and even with the volume up, there was something clearly wrong with the speaker. And of course, as you saw previously, I put in the speaker from the DP2 and there was no issues with that. So the speaker for one was faulty, and that's brand new out of the pack. So if anyone comes across a situation like that where it feels like the sound is really, really quiet or muted, or it's got a sort of a hissy, crackly sound to it, then I would at first assume that maybe you've also been supplied with a dud speaker. So the second thing was the DCC address issue, and I have come to the conclusion so far that it seems to be more of an issue with the 8-pin decoders than it is with the 21-pin decoders. So when I entered the 9222 address associated with the running number, when I took that over to DCC for the JMRI to read that address, it just completely scrambled it. Only, I think, one digit, the first number, was correct, and all the other numbers were completely different. So initially maybe I thought, well, okay, maybe there's an issue with a 4-digit address, because of course the DP2 was a 3-digit address. So I dropped the 2 off the end, so it was just 922, and went through the same process, and no, it scrambled that address as well. So what I actually did in the end is I reprogrammed the address under JMRI. I didn't alter any other settings, I just simply reprogrammed the address to 9222, then brought it back into the Bluetooth mode and then refreshed the CVs. And there's a little refresh button up here, and that actually then picked up the new address, or the correct address that I had programmed under JMRI. And these values are determined by CV17 and CV18, which is part of the extended address, and they give out these values. One is 228, the other one is value 6, and that can be worked out through a nifty little wee website that I found, and there's a link in the description for that, where you can enter your long address and it produces the CV values that are needed for CV17 and 18, and it came out correct, but only after I did a refresh of the CV editor. So there's clearly something not quite right, I think, in terms of the app being able to assign a long address correctly to the chip. So hopefully in future updates from Hornby with the app, that they'll iron out some of these glitches. So finally, in terms of the Android device, as I mentioned, I suspect the A12 Samsung phone, which I have, is in progress with Hornby in terms of enabling its compatibility with this DCC app and the Bluetooth chips. One of the interesting aspects within Hornby's documentation is they strongly recommend not using a device more than 5 years old. Now the A12 is 3 years old, so I think the model I've got was introduced in 2020, so I'm assuming, you know, they are going to work on developing or improving the app to be more compatible with that device. So I'd love to hear from anyone who has actually successfully managed to program a chip, upload a profile using that Android phone, and it'll be interesting to see what model of Android phone you were using in order to do the updates. Also, I'd be interested to know from anyone who has a Samsung A12 and has been able to successfully upload a profile and program a chip via their phone, and maybe there's just simply something I'm not doing right in my Android phone. I'm pretty sure that I've got all the Bluetooth side of things set up correctly how it should be, but not being an Android expert, maybe there is something I missed. So it would be great to hear from anyone who currently has an A12 and has successfully been able to use it with Hornby's new Bluetooth decoder system. So there we have it. I finally managed to encounter a little bit of success in getting some sound into this locomotive using Hornby's HM7000 Bluetooth decoders. So on finishing off the installation, it was a simple case of inserting the speaker actually into the body component of the tender and gluing that in upside down, and then of course that actually faces downwards out through where there's a speaker cavity that sends the sound out onto the track below. So that actually worked out and it all fitted in quite nicely. So it seems apparent that Hornby have yet to iron out some of the glitches within the decoders and also within the app. And in my experience, the 8-pin decoder seems to encounter more issues than the 21-pin decoder did. So I'm hoping that Hornby persevere with this and fine-tune both the app and of course the decoders, because I do think it is a really fantastic system. It's great to be able to purchase literally a blank sound chip and be able to install a sound profile of your own choice and even mix and match and take a decoder out of an old locomotive, put it in a new locomotive and rewrite the sound profiles. So yeah, there's endless sort of possibilities there, but yep, they just need to get some of these things ironed out, some of the issues and glitches which I have encountered with these decoders. Now, in terms of the dud speaker that I got, that is a quality issue. Obviously, they're not probably going to test every single speaker that leaves the factory, but obviously I've encountered one that was faulty in some way. So I'll leave it there for today. I certainly hope there's some information in there that may help those who have questions about this Hornby DCC system. So as always, take care, look after yourselves, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.